Hello, and welcome to the Basic Inspection Instruments and Techniques lesson. At the end of this lesson, you'll be able to understand the types of inspection instruments typically used and when to use each while working at Monti Incorporated. Let's begin. Inspection instruments are used to measure the parts you are producing and will provide you with a value in order for you to determine if your parts are within specification. Now, the most commonly used gauges on the shop floor at Monti include the tape measure, calipers, pin gauges, and a height gauge. Now, these are the most basic gauges used at Monti, and all employees working at Monti should feel comfortable using them. Let's discuss each a little further. Well, first off, we have the tape measure. Now, this is definitely not the most accurate inspection tool, but it is good for measuring parts in which there's no other gauge available to measure a large dimension. At Monti, the biggest set of calipers we have would go up to, say, 24 inches. Well, if we've cut a piece off the saw that's 30 inches, or we have a piece of sheet metal that's, say, 40 inches, a tape measure is a good tool to use to measure those dimensions. But it's good for measuring parts that have at least a plus or minus 1/32 tolerance. 0.0312 decimally. Down here below we have a scale, and this is what you'll see on a tape measure. Now, you might not see all these numbers on it. It'll have the gradient lines, but this is a scale that you need to know and be comfortable with while working at Monti. Let's just go over a few of the gradients. Well, we have an 1/8 inch, a 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch, and 1 inch. Every inch will then include more of these gradients. In order to find out what the decimal equivalent is for 1/8, we would simply go 1 divided by 8 in your calculator, and you'll get a result of 0.125. Likewise, if I take 3/8 of an inch, 3 divided by 8 will return you 0.375. 7/8 of an inch, 7 divided by 8 will give you a result of 0.875. Again, this is a scale you should be comfortable using, and converting fractions to decimals is very important. We'll discuss this more when we get to the math chapter in a future lesson. Okay, a second tool that we use at Monti Incorporated. This tool is the calipers. This is the most widely used inspection tool on the shop floor at Monti. All production employees should own at least one pair of 6-inch calipers. If you're going to be inspecting your work at Monti, you gotta have a set of calipers. I sell them for $20. You can see Chris Narborough, the operations manager. He will get you a set. But please, if you buy a set, you gotta make sure you get it calibrated by our quality team. Calipers are good for measuring anything within the range of the particular caliper. So if you have a feature that's, say, 5.5 inches long, a 6-inch caliper is going to do good there. However, if you've got a dimension and it's 8.5 inches long, well, a 6-inch caliper is probably not going to be the best tool to use. Now, they do make an 8-inch caliper, and they make a 12-inch caliper, and then they make a 24-inch caliper. I even think they make an 18-inch. But as you get bigger in length, the calipers get very, very expensive. Calipers are easy to use because of the digital readout on the instrument. Most of the calipers that we have at Monti have the digital readout. The ones I sell have a digital readout. There are some out there that are dial calipers, and they're also very easy to read. But they're not as bulletproof as the decimal type that you see below. One important feature I have to point out on a caliper is anytime you go to use it, you'll want to make sure you slide this all the way together so the calipers are touching each other, and it's good. You want to take your thumb or a rag and clean these off so you don't have any debris in them. And when you do that, click the 0, so you'll zero it out. Up here you'll have an inch in metric conversion. Almost everything we do at Monti is in inch, so you want to make sure you're in inch mode. Next up, we have pin gauges. Pin gauges are a very accurate and consistent method for checking hole diameter and inside radius. When checking the ID, inside diameter, simply select the upper and lower spec of the hole. Now here's a little example we have. Let's say we have a half-inch diameter hole, and the tolerance for that particular hole is plus or minus 5/1000ths of an inch. So, if I was going to go over to the cart and find the appropriate gauge pins for this job, I would select a .504 and a .496. Okay, so basically I've added 4/1000ths to the nominal, which is a half inch, and I've deducted 4/1000ths of an inch from the nominal, okay, to give me a range. By doing this, this will ensure the hole size is within spec. Okay, I'm leaving 1/1000ths on each side just to make sure my hole is in. Pin gauges are the best way to check hole diameters. Calipers are okay as well, but there's nothing more bulletproof than a pin gauge. Pin gauges are conveniently located within the department inspection centers. We have those scattered throughout the shop. They're in the QC office and on the shop floor. Now listen, please be courteous and return pins when finished with them. There's nothing more aggravating than going to your inspection center, going to use a pin gauge, and noticing that half the set is missing. Take ownership of the pins you use them effectively, and put them back at the end of use. Lastly, we have the height gauge. Now the height gauge is similar to calipers when it comes to checking the height or length of a part. The height gauge can be used whenever you need to check a dimension that is within the range of the gauge. Typically, heights are checked with the height gauge. Now, on the shop floor, we have a 12-inch height gauge, 18-inch height gauge, and a 24-inch height gauge. The height gauges are great for measuring anything that you're checking a height on. But if you need to check the thickness of something, a height gauge will work for that. Even though it's called a height, you can check thicknesses. It's just great for measuring anything where you're going from one level to the next level. Now, you can use a height gauge to measure center of hole to center of hole, but that gets a little bit more tricky. There's math involved and pin gauges involved, but it can be done. A height gauge should be used on a flat surface, such as a surface plate. And again, just like with the calipers, anytime you go to use the height gauge, always zero the gauge out before using it. So what you would do is you take this, you wheel it all the way down, very carefully and smooth, such that you zero out on the surface that the gauge is sitting on. You'll come over here and push the 0 button. Okay, that'll take this to all zeros. And then you'll wind it up till you get to the height of where you're at. You scoot the gauge over towards your part, and you come down very easily on top of the part with this wheel, and that'll give you a readout. The height gauge is also good for scribing lines on a part. So if you need to lay something out very quickly and easily, you could set it to whatever dimension it is you want to achieve and take it and scribe it across your part. That concludes our first lesson on gauges for the shop floor at Monti Incorporated. Thank you.